Welcome back, everyone, to episode 3 of the BZ Music Podcast. I am your co-host, Zach Seif.
And I'm Ben Weise. Thank you all for tuning in today. We got a really fun episode today.
This is going to be great. We have a special guest today, too, that we'll be talking to in a little bit. But before we do that, I figured now, since we're a couple episodes in, it'd be a great time to, fully introduce ourselves. So I'll go first. My name is Zach Seif. I am a professional musician and private lesson teacher in the New Jersey, New York City area, and I attend Berklee College of Music, and that's pretty much it. What about you, Ben?
My name is Ben Weise. I'm also a guitar player. I live in the New York, New Jersey metro area. Zach and I pretty much do a lot of the same stuff. We freelance, play for a lot of musicals. I teach privately. I have a bunch of students, and I attend Rutgers University. I'm actually about to graduate, so that's some exciting and a little exciting piece of side news.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Are you done like this month?
I'm done on Sunday.
That's like right here.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool. Congrats.
Yeah, I actually just finished a final right before I messaged you. So
okay.
So I was like, that was very relieving to get that out of the way. I had one like a week ago, and then I just have this one, and then one on Sunday, and then
okay.
Finn.
That's it. I've got one more full year, kind of. So again, the way that the Berklee Online works, right? So for Rutgers, right, you had like your fall and spring, right, and then the option of like some summer stuff. So finishing up my degree online, we have 4 quarters throughout the year that we can choose to do. So there are 12-week accelerated sections, whereas most colleges are like 14 to 15 weeks or so per section. So I've got 2 courses I'm taking now, and then I only have 6 classes total left, and I'm doing 2 at a time.
Damn.
So literally this time next year, I'll be done. So it's really exciting. Once I graduated from Raritan Valley, with my AFA, it kind of took a year off because I was waitlisted everywhere. I mean, we'll talk about college when we have our guest on, but places like to waitlist you because they can only take so many of each instrument at a time. So it's really difficult to get into a program because you can be super good and have the grades and the outside experience, but if a place only has 10 guitar players at a time and they already have 10, they just can't take you.
Exactly. I mean, I have personal experience with that too.
Yeah.
Because I auditioned for the Rutgers music program, Mason Gross, 3 times, and I was
okay.
Yeah, I didn't get in the first time or the second time, and the second time I would have gotten in, but they didn't accept any guitar students because they were already at their max, at their capacity for players, which was kind of made me think, like, why did they even let anyone audition in the first place?
Right.
If they just weren't going to accept anyone. And there were some really, really good players who auditioned with me, like friends of mine now. Yeah. Really, really good players who didn't get in, and they had to go at it again. But like, thankfully, I didn't have to deal with that, the following year, because but yeah, that whole process is just, I mean, it kind of sucks, but at a point, I guess it's something they have to do,
Yeah, for sure. It's a whole thing. One thing I want to talk about real quick before we have our special guest, which goes by a very similar name that we're already familiar with here. So just kind of wrapping up on the last two episodes that we had, I figured the main topic for today would be gigs. How to get gigs, what kind of gigs we have, what kind of gigs we were going to do that we don't have anymore, gigs that we're looking forward to, um, and the gear that goes with it. So I figured we'd name this episode Gigs and Gear, something along those lines. So I've got a couple, questions kind of lined out. Um, but again, before we bring in our guest, um, so it looks like you've got some of your studio stuff that you ordered. So what have you been up to with it? Have you been able to create any music, or are you still kind of trying to figure out how it all works? Do you have everything going? And what do you hope to get out of the studio gear that you have?
Well, actually, yeah, I have been using, been putting it to good use. At first, it was a little bit of a transition. It was a little bit of a struggle, just because I had only ever recorded myself in a studio, like in an actual thing where I was not in control, and so I had no idea. I had no idea how any of that stuff worked. And
Yeah.
this is tame compared to the kind of things you see in an actual studio.
What studios have you been to? Any off the top of your head that you can remember?
It was just my band, the Other Lovers.
Yeah.
We were recording we're it's still in the process of recording our first album at a friend's like personal studio in Hoboken.
Okay. Cool.
So it's not like a big name, studio or anything. It's just like it's his own thing, but he's like a professional,
Yeah.
like at
Dude,
mixing and
sometimes
stuff.
those places are more comfortable too because it kind of feels more laid back and home, versus some of these
Hmm.
places where, you've got Madonna across the hallway from you and you're like, all right, well, I guess I got to do something now. No,
Exactly.
I hear you. Those places that kind of look like someone's house, those are the best.
Exactly. And so that was all I had known, really. Like I had never attempted to do any of that stuff on my phone. Like I said last week, I think we talked about this last week. All I really had until I got my interface was my phone,
Yeah.
and so that can only get you so far. So I felt like it was about time to kind of up my game with that. And at first, it was a little bit of a struggle figuring out how to use Ableton and Pro Tools. It was a little daunting.
Okay.
But then once I figured out the ins and outs of it, I was like, oh, okay, like this is how you EQ sound. This is how you sync up tracks and stuff. So
Yeah.
now I feel tremendously more comfortable with it. If you had asked me this last week, like this time last Friday, I would be like, dude, I am so lost. Like
It's a process, when I recorded my first EP that came out in 2015, right? My solo music goes under the name Regression. We can get into that later, but um, basically my experience with recording at that point, as I said, was I was mapping drum beats in FL Studio, which is what EDM and DJs use. And then I was using Audacity to record my Line 6 pod direct. All right. And then once I finally got my MacBook and got Logic, which is I still use today, definitely streamlined a bit. But I was learning how to record as I was going, and I made this mistake. I was also mixing while I was going, so I would record like sections of the song and then kind of go from there just to mess around with it and try and figure it out. And that's really the best way to do it is, again, you can sit in a classroom and learn how to do all of this and take notes and watch others, but until you're doing it yourself, you really don't know what you're doing. So you'll find that a lot. The less tools you use, the more you'll focus on it. And what I mean by that is, the less plugins and stuff you use, less EQ and compression and whatnot. Once you get your sources set the right way, and then you figure out, okay, maybe this needs a little tweaking, then you can make small changes, and eventually, you'll pick up on it, which is really cool. So that's
yeah,
it's always so exciting to get something new.
that's true. It was like I I had this sort of battle in my mind when I was struggling with this.
Yeah.
It kind of I've had this before where I've had this sort of inner struggle where it's like I shouldn't I'm not cut out for this, basically. Where which is I feel like everybody thinks that way if they start something and they immediately are terrible at it,
Absolutely, yeah.
which is 100% of the time.
For sure.
But then I thought about it. I thought, when was the last time I learned something like brand new, or at least maybe not even brand new, maybe just like a new solo or a new lick, or you wrote a really interesting chord progression, and you did. When was the last time you did something different? And I was like, wasn't that like the best feeling? And so,
dude, hands down, especially once you finally start to get it and you're like, that hard work pays off.
yeah. And then I sent out, I recorded some tracks and sent it to some friends to do some like collabs.
Yeah.
And it was like, even just doing that, like I hadn't even heard feedback from them on how the music was, but just the fact that I was able to do that and send it out and not just be like, here's a phone recording, here's a video, just, and just to be able to do that, I felt, it was just, I felt kind of proud of myself,
Yeah,
not to sound, not to sound vain or anything, but it was like, wow, like I can do this.
Absolutely. And yeah, you just keep on doing it, and you'll definitely get there. I'm 5 weeks into the current recording class that I'm doing at school, and we're kind of prepping for our midterm right now. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a song that I started writing it in 2016 as a follow up, part of the record for the next one I was going to do. Never came out. But it's like an overture. So it features themes from different songs throughout the album. So it's got a full string orchestra as well as a full, 4-piece metal band. And I'm sitting there, and the trick with working with MIDI, right? MIDI is not audio. It's all ones and zeros. It's all digital, music. So
fun.
it's using MIDI CCs, continuous control and stuff like that, and like parameters inside the program to make it sound more realistic. So that's like a whole other thing. To master audio recording takes a lifetime, and then to get MIDI to sound realistic, that's a whole other thing. So it's, well, if the violin player, would be swinging their bow back and forth, well, how do I emulate that with the computer? So you're sitting there and you figure out how it is, and then you're sitting there with your mouse and you got to like draw in the bowing and stuff like that. It's insane. But yeah, so like, recording's a ton of fun.
It's like Photoshop for recording.
Dude, for real. All right. So at this point in time, I think we're going to introduce our guest for the day. So this is someone who I think I met him because, I run a gear page on Facebook. We'll get to that. It's called the New Jersey Gear Exchange. So if you're in the New Jersey, New York, PA area and you're looking to up your music game, feel free to sell your old instruments there, buy some new ones, and make some friends. That's how I met the majority of people that I work with today. It's great. But anyway, please welcome our guest for the day. We'll let him log in and introduce himself. This is really cool. I think we should start trying to utilize some weekly guests. Lots of people for sure.
There he is.
We got video. Do we have audio? Not yet.
Hello, you should.
There we go. All right. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Benjamin Samuelson. I'm a guitarist from New Jersey. And I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Cool. So,
nice.
Ben, meet Ben, Ben, meet Ben. But, we don't have to do that because you guys already know each other.
That's right.
So we were just kind of talking about recording and whatnot. Why don't you give us a little bit more background? What types of work you do? What school you went to. You and I had a debate the other day as to what school you actually went to. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so I started out as primarily a jazz guitar player, and actually that's how Ben and I know each other. We studied with the same teacher, a guy named the late Vic Juris, fantastic guitar player. And then I do go to college at the New School for jazz and contemporary music in New York City. But amongst New Jerseyans, I go to about 4 different colleges because seemingly I've built this lore around myself that nobody really knows what school I go to, and everyone at Rutgers thinks I go to William Patterson, and everyone at William Patterson thinks I go to Rutgers, and everyone at the New School thinks I go to school in New Jersey. So it's really, I've managed to not really cement myself anywhere, but that's been great because I like to have a lot of connections at all the different schools.
Absolutely.
It's a smart way of going about it.
Yeah. So I'm also one of I think we're up to 4 or 5 Bens who play guitar from New Jersey. So
yeah,
we're part of that connection.
Sounds about right.
That's kind of how I discovered him, at least. I was like, oh wow, another Ben who plays guitar, and then I found 3 more. I was like, oh, I guess it's not that uncommon as I was led to believe.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for joining us, dude. So glad to have you on.
Again, of course.
Just to reiterate, this is the BZ Music Podcast, Ben and Zach Music Podcast, and our topic for today is gigs and gear. So we're going to talk about what kind of gigs we normally do, how to get gigs, maybe some tips, what gigs we had that we no longer have, and gigs that we're looking forward to. And we'll kind of start there. And then for the second half, we'll kind of talk about how gear plays in on a, just daily basis, so on. So, just to kind of start for our guest, why don't you tell us, what kind of regular gigs you do, during a regular season, and how you went about to get them or how you got those opportunities in the first place.
Sure. So I think at this point, I have to, if I'm being completely honest with myself, about 70% of my work is music theater related. So I am like a, I guess, full-time musical theater guitarist and keyboardist because I also double keys. And that came from basically New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey has people who watch this are probably going to be from this area, but if they're not, New Jersey has a strong community and high school theater circuit, and a lot of times they use young musicians in those pits. And then through that, you get to meet people who maybe work in the city and live in New Jersey and took a gig just to get some cash or whatever. So then you can kind of climb your way up the musical theater Broadway ladder just by working in New Jersey, which is really great. So I, like I said, through Ben and I's teacher and just personal study, acquired a lot of really good sight reading skills. And so once word gets around that you can read on guitar, you start to get a lot more calls. So, and now that the theater work has been super consistent up until COVID, that allowed me to sort of afford to be able to do some more passion projects. Because if I knew that I could, cover my expenses, then I would be down to take a gig at pianos or something for no money. Yeah. So I guess the other 30% would be, I like to play with singers. I like to run other people's bands. Like if a singer is like, hey, I have a gig, I need a band. I like to music direct and kind of steer the ship behind the scenes and that kind of stuff. So that would, and then I have a trio where I still play a little bit of jazz guitar called B3N, like B with the E backwards. And we play in New Brunswick, college bars and basements and stuff. And that's we call it Jazz Plus because we get a little carried away sometimes. But yeah, I would say that makes up most of my work.
Cool. What about you, co-host Ben too?
B squared. Yeah, so that's to a lesser extent, that's generally my wheelhouse too. Like a lot of my work pre-COVID was in the musical theater kind of realm. I mean, like like we said at the beginning, like I'm also from New Jersey, so like the community there and like everyone kind of, if not knows each other personally, then they kind of know a lot of names and they know of a lot of people. So so for me, that's where a lot of my work came from. That's where like I was kind of that's kind of where like all of my work came from for a period of time before I started really getting into teaching. And you know it was now I teach. I mean, with since obviously we don't have any gigs coming in, all of my work is in private teaching and stuff, which I'm very happy about that, because I I had kind of wanted to make music or things, music related things, my source of, my source of income, and not have to rely on, I
You
guess,
need a real job. You don't want to get a
yeah.
real job. Is that what
No,
it
no, yeah, that's,
is?
that's, thank you for, seeing through it.
Yeah, we should. I'll talk about teaching later. I have interesting opinions on teaching.
Oh, yeah.
But that's where, that was kind of where I guess in regards to musical theater, I guess I sort of just ended up in it some way. Like I never really, in the past, I never like actively pursued it, but I just kind of ended up, like, it just sort of happened to be because I did a lot of sort of student theater stuff for Rutgers when I was there, and that led to doing more paid stuff, and high school musicals and regional theaters and stuff like that. So it just kind of snowballed from there, and at one point I was like, well, I guess I'm a theater guy now. and so that was but on my own, I've sort of pursued other interests, whether it be starting bands or trying to teach more, and then or just like Ben said, playing with singers and backing up people regardless of how much money it brought in, just to be able to do other things and not make myself appear one dimensional, I suppose.
Yeah. So, what kind of non-theater gigs do you normally do throughout the year?
Well, I do a lot of I play a lot with my band, the Other Lovers. We're in, or at least I did, when gigs were things. Um, but yeah, I did a lot of that stuff, doing like cocktail hour, like jazz trio or jazz duo stuff. Whether it's around Rutgers or just like near, nearby and stuff like that. I also for the past year or so, we've been working on starting this like event/wedding band with a bunch of people I know from Rutgers.
I've been trying to start one of those forever, man.
Moneymaker.
No luck.
Yeah, it's a money maker, and the music, if you pick the right music, it is fun. Especially if it's like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe not all modern pop music is fun, but hey, you get to play guitar and you get paid for it.
Playing it in a live setting in that scenario is fun. Throwing some distortion on top of a Zed song, or
Yeah.
Get to throw a guitar solo into the Bruno Mars song.
Yeah, right. As if anybody needs that. I know, Zach, you also play in like a band, so I didn't mention that, but I do play in like an established pop band. They're called Little Man on the Radio. And Jersey people, there was a band called Dazed, and when Dazed split up, half of them joined Cook Thuglas, and the other half made Little Man on the Radio, and then Cook Thuglas, they moved to LA, and they have like a pretty nice career right now. But the other half, the other guys I have a band called Little Man on the Radio, and we play in Brooklyn and whatever. So if I had to reorganize my breakdown, it would be 70% on the theater gigs, 15% with Little Man on the Radio, and then 15% of passion projects.
That's pretty sweet. What kind of music do you do with a Little Man on the Radio?
It's like straight up alternative, like your younger sister will like it, that kind of music. Like
It's like a
jangly guitars and synth bass, and you know,
okay.
my job is to kind of cover some of the weirder sounds. We could talk about that when we talk about gear later, but I'm like the lead guitar player, but it's not like shred lead, it's like finding parts and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's very like unapologetic, like the Strokes, like pop music. It's great.
Nice. Yeah, so, for myself, I would say that my theater gigs kind of peaked in 2017, 2018 when I was doing, about 5 or 6 musicals a year or so. I'd say those numbers are pretty accurate. I would do 2 or 3 in the high school season, which for anyone who's not a theater person, between the months of February and May, there are very few musicians who are not booked for theater gigs because that's when middle schools and high schools and colleges all do their musical theater productions. So if you're not doing a gig, it's probably because you already have 1 or 2 others that conflict on the same days. Um, so
Sometimes of the same show.
Yeah. Usually Mamma Mia.
always Mamma Mia. Mamma Mia. So the theater work for me started to kind of die out a little bit last year. I only did 2 productions, maybe 3. I think I did 2. And then I gave the show. I give a lot of my stuff to you guys sometimes. Mostly just due to my teaching schedule, and again we'll get into that later. But the majority of what I do, so I'm going to say 80% of my gigs or so are band gigs. I would say probably less than half of that are cover bands, and the other half of that is the original band that I joined at the end of last year. So my original band, Triple Addiction, we're a southern rock band, country rock band from here in New Jersey, and we had 2 months booked of shows that crumbled before our eyes, and it was devastating. But we've shared the stage with bands like Buck Cherry, Saving Gable, Tantric. We've opened for oh my god, who else have we played with? We played with a bunch of people. We were supposed to open for LA Guns. That show got rescheduled. We're opening for Hinder for their anniversary tour. Again, that was supposed to be the end of this month. That got rescheduled for, I think, October or so. And we were in talks with the Barefoot Music Country Festival that was going to happen here in Jersey. So we would have been opening for Blake Shelton, Carrie Underwood, Leonard Skinner,
Wow.
which would have been, a pretty big freaking thing. But, that's being postponed to next year, which is totally cool. So we play venues like the Chameleon Club, the Voltage Lounge. We played the Stanhope House a ton, Artie's. We played the Gin Mill, all those kinds of places. So that's the majority of what I do with them. I am the official touring guitar player, lead guitar player. I do some writing with them. They're the main core of the band. The band consists of 3 triplets plus me, the guy who's not related to them. So, my job was to, learn the parts on the record from the old guitar player, and then find ways to make it work live. So I reworked a lot of solos, chord voicings, that kind of thing. So that's the main band that I'm in. And then for the cover bands, the 2 main cover bands I'm in are Remember Yesterday. We do 80s to today, mostly rock, hard rock, pop rock. So we do, Paramore and the Killers, but then we also do Stone Temple Pilots, Blink 182, Metallica, Poison, Def Leppard, anything that makes you drink and dance. And great. So we play just about 1 to 2 times a month, which is perfect. We're on a regular rotation with 2 different bars in the area, and we do like 5 festivals a year or so. So I always look forward to those. We can talk about outdoor gigs a bit more in depth later. Oh, yeah. And the other band I'm in, Those Amazing Decades, we're an event band, but we're not like wedding bands. It's, we do a lot of casinos and ballrooms and stuff like that. So it's a full show, full production. We do a 70 set, an 80 set, a 90 set, and we play a number 1 tune from each year. And we have costume changes and gear changes, and we have an
awesome.
MC DJ in between sets. It is the coolest thing I've done. So we were headlining Starland Ballroom, and that got canceled, and I am devastated because I've wanted to play the goddamn Starland Ballroom ever since I found out what the Starland Ballroom was.
Everyone in Jersey.
Everyone.
Who doesn't want to get hit with a tin beer can?
Basically.
That's awesome.
So we do that, and then I'd say the other 20% of what I do is I do a couple gigs a year where I teach, where I play in the pit orchestra, where I switch between bass, electric, and acoustic, depending on the song. It's all Broadway stuff, so it's all reading off of charts and piano conductor scores. And then in the summer, if we do like more pop stuff, I'll kind of, figure out some parts by ear, throw on some distortion, and call it a day. So do some theater stuff here and there. That's the majority of what I do. Every now and then I've done some solo gigs for private events. I played a couple events at the college I used to go to, Raritan Valley. I would play a couple galas and internship meetings and stuff like that there, some private luncheons. And and then fill-in work. There's a couple bands that I filled in for, like Audio Riot. I also play with the Joe Lesky band. We haven't done anything in a bit, but I'm a guitar player there, and I'm going to fill in for the band Mindrazor later this year. So it's less theater stuff, So there's kind of like a pro con there because I did a lot of theater stuff from high school all the way through up until really last year. But my regular MDs either did a little bit less work or, they kind of moved on to some bigger productions and, found, other bands and stuff like that, other members, just totally cool. They can be time consuming for sure. And the big problem is because of how often I teach is being able to get those nights available to do the gigs. So we can definitely talk about that in a bit. But again, I think you guys can all confirm that one of the biggest things is scheduling and being able to commit to what is required by the gig or the person given the gig. One of the hardest things, in my opinion, was when I was doing, 20 credits and working and trying to take theater gigs at the same time was like, how the hell do you physically be in 3 places at once? Well, you learn how to do that as a musician, especially as someone who can read music on the guitar in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's become like I guess is the thing that if we're talking about how to get gigs and how to work gigs, especially around here, my philosophy has always been that I never say no to anything unless I absolutely have to. And even then sometimes I say yes, and then I let a week go by, and then I pass it to somebody else so that I didn't have to say no. And I've shot myself in the foot many times with getting double booked, which is hard. And also it's hard, like if you go to school, and I have to commute into the city, so I go to the city, I go to class, and then I leave class and I teach a lesson, and then I go to a musical, and then I go out afterwards, and then do that 6 days in a row. You get a little tired, but also you learn to flip into that mindset. And then I started to get to the point where I was like, you know what, maybe I should just do like 1 gig a week. And then, you might find that you are able to invest yourself more into that one show. And then you get a better output. So that's another thing, is like, how much does it appear, and appearing to be busy. That's another thing, is like, how well do you post about your gigs on Facebook, not even to get people to come to the show, but just so that people know that you're working. Because I think that goes a long way in this current climate. People will be like, oh man, you got like a gig every night, man. That's awesome. And like me on the other side, I'm like, well, I posted that at a gig, but maybe I was just busking, or maybe, I was just like jamming with a friend. But if you put it on your calendar, who knows? Who's to say it's not a gig? And then people get an impression of you that you're really busy, which helps your cred. And so I think that's important.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I've gotten to a regular social media posting, where same day, I post XYZ every week on Instagram. Facebook is, regular everything. And whenever I have a gig, during the year, I'll usually do like a beginning of the month, like, hey, here's what I've got going on this month. I've got this musical, I've got this wedding, I've got this gig, this bar, this band, blah, blah, blah. And at least people are aware. And more often than not, you'll get at least a handful of people to show up to one or two of those things if they're in the area, which is really cool, because if you can just get one person to come out one time, they have a great time, they tell their friends, so the next time you're doing a show, they're like, hey, have you seen these guys before? They're pretty cool. So now that's two people that come out, and then it just builds from there. And that's really just how you build a following in general. I've had some friends come out to theater gigs, just because they love theater, but then they found out that I was playing, and they were like, oh, so that's like two reasons to go. I mean, they should want to come see me, of course, but you get a show as well. Well, that's not too shabby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess on that same kind of topic, like just kind of advertising on social media about the gigs and stuff, or just really utilizing social media as a platform to kind of promote yourself. It's good to do that with not just advertising what gigs you're playing or where you're playing, but also just maybe just posting videos or showing what tunes you're doing. I mean, Zach, I know you post like the riff of the day, every day, I think, for the past couple weeks.
I think 40 to 45, maybe 50 days straight now where I've been posting a riff every day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I have so people who maybe through this backtrack to my socials and stuff, I actually kind of intentionally don't post things of me playing. If I do, they're very short. Like, I think there's a video on my Instagram right now of me playing, but I literally just play like one chord, but it's like a clip from a gig, but it's just like a strong downbeat. Cause and now this also plays, if the topic is how to get gigs, part of what you build through your calendar and your postings and your interactions, like day to day, and the types of work you get is like your artist persona, but like what kind of guy you are. And I think for someone like myself, where I'm not super great at, first of all, I'm just not good at doing those kinds of social media posts. So I was like, well, I'm not going to bother. And I'm going to take the route where it's more like a foggy mirror, where people are like, oh, Ben Samuelson, that guy's everywhere. But maybe you don't necessarily, you can't like look up a video of me playing and like hear it right away. And that so far has worked to my advantage, because that lets my in-person interactions like stand out really strong. People be like, oh yeah, that guy's good.
Definitely. I can attest that it works for certain people, and you're definitely one of those people. The past couple of times I've offered you work, you're like, yeah, I'm already got a gig, or yeah, I've already got this going on. So clearly you've made the right connection somehow, and you've got the network there to kind of keep that going, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think either way works, but I definitely try not to try and do both. I don't try and post social media videos and be super transparent and also have like a different thing when I'm in person at the gig. And I think you two do a really nice job of like portraying who you really are online. Like when I watch your videos, I'm like, nice, man, that was awesome. Like I know exactly who that guy is, versus my stuff where it's like, right now on my Instagram, it's like a video of me making pizza, so it kind of has this, and then the next clip is like, oh, I'm like doing some guitar thing, we're building. And I think for people watching, like what matters is that you commit to one of them, and it'll all lead to the same place if you do it right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
I used to have like a social media presence where I saw something, took a picture. Oh, cool. Everyone cares about this, right? And then I kind of restructured once I started at Berkeley, because one of the first things we did in like Music Business 101 was you got to build yourself into a brand. All right, you're not selling yourself as a guitar player. You're selling yourself as a brand. Who is Zach Seif? Who is Ben Sam? Who is Ben Weise? I always want to call you Wise or Wise. I just found out your last name 40 minutes ago. So you learn something new every day. You're selling yourself. You know, what you do is why you're called in the first place, but if you stay, determine, is who you are as a person. So in my opinion, your brand is like three main things. It's who you are, like your background, your credentials, what you do, who you are as a person. Are you a dick or are you a good hang? Are you someone that you can be around for more than just the 2 hours you're together or the half hour you're together or the month you're together on tour?
Absolutely.
And three, I think, is also how you present yourself. So are you someone who has a constant theme in your posting in day-to-day life? Or are you the person where when you get there in person, they're like, oh, you're not quite who I was expecting. So I think those three big things really build up your brand.
Yeah.
Whether it's on social media or through person, right? If I'm going to recommend you for a gig, I have to be able to look or message someone and be like, hey, I recommend Ben because he is this, and that. He's filled in for me before. We've swapped gigs before. If I'm like, oh, he's a shred guitar player, and then you show up with a jazz box and you're like, cool,
Right.
so what's the chord chart, man? They're gonna not really expect that. So not only would that kind of make you look like a dope, but it makes me look like a dope. It's really all in how you present.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was like, I didn't really, when I started off, kind of getting gigs and stuff, it was not that I didn't undervalue like the relationship part of it and like the presentation aspect of it, but I definitely I underestimated like how much value that held, because there were some times where I would be playing a show or I'd be playing a gig and I recognize that I maybe messed something up or something, or if we're playing like a pop gig or something and I mess up a song, or if I'm playing a musical theater gig and I'm flub a run or whatever,
Right.
I immediately think to myself, oh, I'm never getting called back. I'm never getting called for this. But like, but then, the next show that they do, they're like, hey, you want to come play the show again? I'm like what? They called me, but then I think back, I'm like, oh, well, I got along with them really well. I got along with everyone really nice. And, I guess like subconsciously, I always tried to leave as good a personal, impact.
Yeah.
A good, leave that kind of impression, if not a musical one. Because I feel like because a lot of the times that I've gotten called back, I feel like it was because I had a personal relationship with someone involved in the production and not entirely based around, my skills.
I think that's huge. I always say, like, especially theater. So I'll just stick to what I know. If you're doing theater, like 90% of my networking is like at the bar after the show, because that's where you build that personal connection. So like a great story is I was subbing for someone. It was a 1 minute, like one day, like, dude, I got to play a gig. Can you sub for me tomorrow in the city? So like a fully professional, all equity, all 802 musical, just like a one night cabaret, a one off. Sometimes they call it like a 29-hour. But anyway, so we were there and I was playing banjo. So I'm a good banjo player, but I wasn't super confident. Again, I was sight reading the book and I made some mistakes in the rehearsal for sure. And the show was the next day. And I was kind of getting weird vibes from the conductor. But I knew one of the other piano players and he was like, hey, me and, I don't know who, John, are going to, get a drink. You want to come? And I was like, yeah, because I have to, be with this guy and just be like, dude, like, I got you. You don't have to worry about me. Because if I had messed up and just packed up my banjo and gotten in the car and gone home, that guy's going to think all night, like, oh, man, that guy kind of folded on the rehearsal. Yeah. But because we went out and we had a beer and we had some food and we talked and I was like, dude, I'm sorry. I just got the book yesterday. So-and-so didn't tell me they needed a sub. I'm going to be cool for tomorrow. Then I could see in their face, they totally relaxed. And the next day when he got up there on the baton and he looked around to sort of like check in on who the people, conductors always have soldiers, like people they know are going to be solid. he looked right at me and he was like, we got each other. So I think if you're trying to get more work and stuff, like, you have to make the hang. That's part of your persona. Like, part of my persona is that I always say yes and I always go, and then I always go out after, no matter how miserable and tired I am. And like,
You have to.
when you and I, Zach, first met each other, I was subbing, or you threw me a gig or something, and then we were like going to trade a pedal, or you were going to give me a check, and you were playing with one of your cover bands at a bar, and I was super tired, and I like, on the way to see you play, I got a speeding ticket, and then I got there and I was like, it was raining, and I was like, I'm just gonna have one beer and like say hi to Zach and leave. But I'm so happy I did, because I think that like was one of the moments where I was like, yeah, now I really know this guy because I've seen him play live.
Absolutely.
So just like, always take the work, always go out after. Like, if this being stuck at home has shown us anything, it's like, you can't afford not to go out. That's part of the job, That's part of the job.
To elaborate, on that a bit, or to connect there a bit more personally, I've, speeding ticket while getting a hang, that's definitely a thing. When I went back to my old college to do guitar for a musical, because I got the MD the gig, and that's the other thing too. If you get people gigs, they'll get you gigs later on. So it was one of those weird things where usually the MD gets you the gig, but when you get the MD the gig, and it's just supposed to be like piano, he'll be like, well, I think piano and guitar will work, so now I have that gig. And on the way to go hang out with the cast after, the dress rehearsal, yeah, freaking speeding ticket. There's a speed trap in Raritan over by the Guitar Center. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know that area all too well.
Want to give Jersey guitar players a bad rap.
Guitar players and their speeding tickets. They play a million notes per second and they all sound like shit. And they drive I can't agree more with being a hang. No matter what YouTuber you look to, they're always going to say that being a hang is one of those things. And, I believe most of you, all of you guys, are you in the musical theater pit guitarist page on Facebook?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You guys for that or whatever. There's some guys there who either we went to the same school or again, we've gig swapped or whatever. One of them is my old music teacher too. Being a hang is the biggest thing. The very first musical I did outside of school was at the Hamilton Stage Theater in Rahway, right in their little downtown arts district. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what to expect because I was so used to just doing, shows at school, high school, college, yada, yada. So this is 2016. This is a pre-beard Zach when I just had the chin strap going. And, I was like, cool, I bring my Ibanez and, my Line 6 pedal, and I bring 2 amps, so that, everyone could hear me because I wasn't sure. And you get to the gig and you have the rehearsal and everyone goes out afterwards. And, I didn't know that. I think the first night I didn't because I did have early work the next day. But I went out every other time. And I quickly found out that once you went out that first night, and again, these are all bars, and I'm only 19, but I'm going in anyway because apparently I look old enough.
Yeah, I mean, I just turned 21 last week, so
yeah, you're still, clearly no one's serving me, but I got to go out and get food. If you're getting there, 4 or 5 o'clock call, and you're not getting to the bar until 10, 11, you're starving.
Exactly.
Because not only did you just literally work a second job, playing, but takes out energy. So I quickly found out that the next day at the next rehearsal, we were all hanging out in the green room as if we'd all been friends forever. Mm-hmm. And I think that definitely helps me, get gigs too. And one of the reasons why I tend to stay in the bands I'm in until either they disband or, I leave for whatever reason. One of the best compliments I got from Triple Addiction, after I auditioned and got in was how, they liked, my promptness, they loved my playing, my organization, whatever. But one of the best things was where I was always down to hang. I was always like, hey, want to go, grab a beer and grab some wings, and we'd all hang out. And then when we get home at, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning from a gig in PA, we all load the tour van, and we're like, all right, dudes, let's do this again tomorrow. And that is the best thing.
Yeah,
definitely. Getting gigs from hangs, I can definitely,
Well, the gig is an hour, right? But the hang is 6 hours because you drive there and you rehearse and you pack your shit up and whatever. And like my friend, my first like pro theater gig, it was a summer stock, so I had to live there. And like the guy was like, he was like, I'm offering it to you because you're good, but also because we have to live in the same house together, and I don't want to live with anybody else. He's like, I want you to come hang out because you like to party or whatever. So that's, you can't rave enough about how important that is. There are so many guys here in Jersey, like where you work a musical and then maybe you go get lunch and you're kind of like, all right, I don't really want to hang out with this guy, and thus I don't care how good you play because it's theater. All the shit is already written down, so somebody else could pick it up and play it. That's important to think about. It was interesting. Like I bet you didn't bring 2 amps to a theater gig after that because you were probably like,
no,
I don't need 2 amps.
No. The amount of times they ask you to turn down, even if you've already turned down a lot.
Well, that was the thing. I was like, hey, can you guys hear me? And they're like, yeah, man, you might actually be like a little too loud. Like they were nice about it. So the next day I pack up all my amps and I only brought the one the next time. Because then eventually I was ran through the house system. Funny enough, though, after a decade of being told to turn down, or not, years of being turned down, the last couple of theater gigs, the guy was always like, hey man, can you like turn up a little bit? And I'd always be like, you're not talking to me, are you?
Thank God.
Yeah.
Turn up. It's like telling the drummer to play louder. That never happens, all right? You gotta put the foot up around them. So the gigs when you're told to turn up, it's like, all right, yeah, I can turn up a little. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, thank you all so much for joining in tonight. This is part 1 of our interview with Benjamin Samuelson. We will continue part 2 next week on the 4th episode of the BZ Music Podcast. We'd like to just let you know that we appreciate you for chiming in every week. Feel free to drop us some questions or some topics that you want us to talk about next week. We'd love to have a weekly segment that involves you, the viewers and listeners of the world. Till next time, make sure you guys are staying safe. Keep on practicing. Take care.